So, socialists are wiping out Democratic Party establishment candidates.
The Democratic Socialists are celebrating another win.
Not just in New York City now, but also in Colorado.
From here to New York, all the way to across the country, DSA is saying that its membership has grown.
Some people on the left are ecstatic. Some people in the middle are freaking out. Both sides need to calm down. I want to talk about it.
Van Jones on Substack.
I've got some harsh things to say about the Democratic Socialists, but before we get into that, let me use this video to level set. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Mamdani-backed candidates in New York City wiped out the establishment earlier this summer, and then recently in Colorado, same thing. And so I think everybody needs to take a little bit of a step back now. This is an exciting time. It's in some ways a troubling time, but it's also a repeat of a number of things that we've seen happen in the Democratic Party time and time again. So let me just walk you through some historical context here so that maybe both sides can be a little bit more sober in their feelings and analysis. Number one, the Gaza effect. A lot of the socialist candidates are coming to voice and coming to power, criticizing and raising concerns about the war in Gaza. Now, there's a lot of ways that they're doing that that can be putting American Jews at risk. We'll talk about that later. But I do want to point out, it's not the first time a young generation has come to voice out of their concern for a war. The Vietnam War produced a whole wave of young people who saw that war. They saw it on their television sets, color television sets, which was new technology at the time, and they were appalled and outraged. They took to the streets. And the dividing line between are you for or against what's happening in Vietnam really divided the generations in a major way. Some of the people in those protests, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. And within 20 years, some of those young protesters were in the White House. You get Bill Clinton in part because of the young people protesting against a war in Vietnam. And then my generation, Generation X and some of the millennials, were appalled by the Iraq War and George W. Bush taking us into that war. And you had a lot of young people come out in the streets, including myself, against that war. And in that context, a young guy named Barack Obama went to a rally and opposed the war. He became president of the United States, and Hillary Clinton in 2008 did not become president of the United States because she supported the war at first. And so this cleavage between an older generation, Hillary Clinton, and a younger generation represented by Barack Obama came out of, again, concern about a war. And now we have the Gaza War that's having a similar impact on the Democratic Party. Older voters have a more complex view of Israel and the Middle East, given our experience. But the younger people are looking at their phones and they're seeing on their new technology images that they find appalling. And for them, it's black and white. And if you can defend in any way what's happening to the people in Gaza, you're on the other side of a moral line for them. And the same way that Vietnam gave us Bill Clinton and Iraq gave us Barack Obama, in some ways, Gaza has given us Mamdani and all these others. This is something we've seen before. Another thing that we've seen before, there's a physics to politics. And sometimes when things swing too far in one direction, they then swing far back in the other direction. And we saw that again very recently with the Tea Party movement. President Obama was elected in 2008, and then 2009, you saw this swing to the right with the Tea Party movement, marching, protesting, demonstrating, calling Obama a socialist, and actually dragging Obama somewhat to the right. The Tea Party was so powerful that Barack Obama tried to cut a deal with them in the summer 2011 to maybe cut $1 trillion in middle-class programs just to get them off his back. That never happened. Why not? Because in reaction to the Tea Party, another movement on the left emerged, Occupy Wall Street. And you had young people taking to the streets, protesting, saying, hey, the Tea Party's pulling us too far to the right. We want things to move back toward the left. And guess what? When they did that, they broke a lot of taboos in the Democratic Party. Up until that point, because of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama's moderation, you couldn't call for class warfare in the Democratic Party. You'd be called a socialist, you'd be called a communist, You couldn't say tax the rich. You couldn't do those type of things. It was kind of a no-no. But here comes these young people with Occupy Wall Street. And they said, no, there's something called income inequality. People hadn't heard that term. There's something called the 1%, the rich, versus the 99%. And they introduced a new vocabulary to talk about class, which had been pushed out of the Democratic Party on those terms for a generation or two. So you have this dynamic of something moves too far to the right. Here comes a movement to the left that breaks taboos. You see that dynamic happening now. Trump has moved so far to the right and done so much crazy stuff that you now have an equal and opposite reaction on the left, and they are breaking taboos. The Democratic Socialists of America, it used to be calling yourself a socialist was a taboo. Certainly, saying that Israel shouldn't exist was a taboo. Behaving in ways that put Jewish lives at some risk and some peril was a taboo. But they've broken those taboos. And so politics has to now readjust and reassess in light of these two movements, MAGA now and DSA. But we've been here before, Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. Another thing that's important to keep in mind, in reaction to these wars over the many years, there's usually an ethnic group that winds up imperiled as a result of the conflict in the United States. After Vietnam, Asian Americans were sometimes not safe. There were actually Asian Americans who were murdered as late as the 1980s. That ethnic group was put in harm's way. After 9/11 and with the Iraq War, Muslims were put in harm's way. Big rise of Islamophobia, and you spent a decade after 9/11 trying to make sure that Muslims were safe, and they weren't, all the way up through the Muslim ban from Donald Trump. This conflict is putting Jews in harm's way, with synagogues being bombed, with even elected officials not being able to walk the streets. And so you're seeing that dynamic again as well. And you have to take account in any movement for who is being put in harm's way, who is being made vulnerable. And that's got to become a part of the conversation as well. I think it's important for us to understand that for this generation of young Democrats, young progressives, their opposition to the Gaza War in their minds is not about anti-Semitism. For them, it's a moral test. From their point of view, if you can see what's happening to people in Gaza and say that's okay, you have failed a moral test for them, and they don't want to hear what else you have to say about anything else. And that's, I think, something important for us to understand. At the same time, there is a way to oppose a war that does not put Jewish people's lives at risk, that does not indicate or suggest that the only country in the world that should be eliminated from the map is the only Jewish country. There's a way for the young people to handle their concerns better. I think it's important for us to understand that for the young people, it's a moral issue. So what am I trying to suggest here? The people who think this is an unprecedented, unheard of development for this new movement to come about, and they imagine they're going to change all of human history because of this unbelievable breakthrough, might want to be a little bit more sober because we've had these dynamics before. And people who think this is the end of the American Republic, that this movement is so catastrophically bad for America that we'll never recover, should also probably calm down a bit. There's the physics of politics tends to create some of these swings, some of these dynamics. The most important thing for us to do is to recognize the young people who are moving forward now are 80% to be celebrated because at least they're not burning down the country. They're not calling for violence. They're not dropping out. They're not doing drugs. They are using our system as it was designed. They're using their voices. They're using their votes to make a positive difference in their own mind. And the thrust of what we've got to say to these young people is, you're right, the establishment has let you down. MAGA is not doing a good job. You do deserve change. The 20%, though, is to make sure that some of the nuttier, meaner, more reckless, and more dangerous ideas don't also get celebrated along with the good. I'll talk about that in the next video.
Van Jones on Substack.